Have you ever reached the end of something and found yourself wondering how much you've grown along the way? That's exactly how I'm feeling as we wrap up the first series of Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids. I thought I'd switch things around for this episode and invite my husband Harry on to interview me. Each conversation has given me so much insight and compassionate advice for our neurodivergent kids, and I hope it's been really helpful for you too. But for now, I am handing over to Harry.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Harry.
And congratulations on the end of the season, right? This end of the series. Have you had fun?
I have. It's been, as I say, full of insight, full of compassion. I think just a mutual understanding of voices that I've really craved. It's kind of been, like I said in the first episode, that coffee shop you're meeting some mum friends at to have a conversation that's really needed, but you're struggling to find that community. And I really feel through the guests I've been able to really thrash out some of my worries, some of the happy bits. So it's been, I found it incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I know lots of your listeners have too, so well done. But yeah, I've seen your passion and your joy when you've come home and you've told me about recordings and the people you've met and the things you've learnt. So not only has it been an education for you, but you've actually loved learning more about it, obviously. And that's part of one of the reasons why you've done this. So I just want to say well done, because you've no doubt touched many people. And it's a conversation that is really important to have. And very proud.
Thank you, Harry.
Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different. I think you want to share some of the best bits of advice that you've learned across the series, but we've also checked your inbox and you've had so many moving messages and brilliant questions from listeners too. So alongside chatting to you about your favourite moments from the series, I'll also be reading out some of those emails and comments. So here we go. So from episode 1, Eliza Fricker, who is the author and illustrator, that episode was on PDA.
Yes, which is
pathological demand avoidance.
Well done, Harry.
Which was a very useful term for us to understand,
it was.
Having experienced it ourselves. And this is the quote that we pulled from that episode. It's often extremely stressful, and bringing that playfulness into it is immediately going to lighten the mood, and it takes that demand and pressure off everyone. Now, that is one piece of advice for me that has been extremely helpful. There is so much, obviously, information that has been given to us through specialists and through this podcast, but that is something that has been a huge asset for me. Not only the other day, I was having a moment at home and I could feel myself about to explode. You know, I've learned about regulation, and that's something that I'm trying to improve myself, and something you often talk about, the benefit of having children. They teach you to better yourself. And I was having a moment where I was feeling overwhelmed and thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna lose it, which is totally counterproductive for everyone in the family. And I was able to use humour in that situation, and it completely lightened the mood. It lightened my mood, and it actually achieved what I wanted to achieve, which was essentially get everyone upstairs for a bath, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but at the end of the day, with the challenges we face, it nearly was a big deal. So I imagine you would agree, and lots of people would have found that also very helpful. Yeah,
I think with anything that's challenging, there's always that element of trying to find a bit of lightness, and humour brings that lightness. I think that goes for so many topics, and children are very naturally able to switch to humour, I think, much better than we are as adults.
Yeah.
And they're playful and they want to have fun. Children are not serious, you know, they don't understand, they haven't got enough of the worries of the world on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing with Eliza was that I think listeners were grateful that PDA was given a place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of parents with neurodivergent kids, when you discover about PDA, it's that light bulb feeling of this makes sense. And one of the things that really helps with demand avoidant children is collaboration. And I really noticed when I started to bring collaboration into situations, I noticed improvements. I also found it one of the things to use with friends or family members to try and explain about how they might respond better than to a demand, and how the demands are covering the anxiety or the demand on them that is just too great.
The collaboration, though, is something I found hard to come to terms with, because I think as a parent, and as the adult, you want to control the situation and you want your children to do as they're told. And you're thinking, hang on, I'm like negotiating or collaborating with a 6-7-year-old here. Like, this just feels wrong. But again, if you can get over yourself, then you are going to get the results that ultimately you desire, not just for you and that child, but the whole family.
So, Harry, Eliza Fricker illustrates for Naomi Fisher.
Yeah.
And actually, it might be quite good to refer to her episode because it leads on quite well to how we kind of combated PDA by looking into low-demand parenting. And actually, what she says in her quote is sort of talking about what you're saying there.
Naomi Fisher, who's the clinical psychologist, author and speaker on low-demand parenting. So here's her little section we pulled out. Okay, so I'm going to see the child's behaviour as them really holding up their flags saying, help, things aren't working for me. I can't cope with this situation. It therefore no longer makes any sense to try and control that behaviour because you're not addressing the root causes of it. So what you try to do with low-demand parenting is to bring down the level of distress and anxiety for the child. What it might look like to others is not punishing them for things. And people might say, oh, you just let them get away with things. You're not letting them get away with things. You're actually looking at what's really going on here. Is what I'm doing helping? And if it's not helping, let's do something else. So I think it's very psychologically informed. Now, as always, something, I massively relate to. And what comes in there as well, I think, is that external pressure from other loving family members or other people around you that generations, yeah, and something I'm sure I've been guilty of as well. Unfortunately, as humans, we tend to judge, and it comes back to that thing of control, wanting to control your child and control some of the behaviour as well. Can be very triggering for a parent, and the way that behaviour presents, it's complete dysregulation and, screaming, shouting, crying, whinging, which is very triggering for a parent and overwhelming if it's happening the whole time. And so, you want to kind of damp that fire out quickly, and you think that by trying to control them, that's the way to do it. But actually, again, something really helpful for me is just going, okay, well, why is this child being like this? And often the biggest thing for me is just giving the child a hug and getting down on their level and saying, it's okay, what is it? Talk to me. And that often does work. And that seems like such a simple and obvious thing to say, but when it's a constant in your life, it's not necessarily that easy. And again, when you're ill-informed, it's maybe not that obvious.
Yeah, and I think from many of the conversations in the series, you are very aware as a parent of what other people might perceive your parenting to be. And sometimes it's in those situations, it's easy to lose the need of the child to actually go in and see what's happening for this child in this moment. You're sort of trying to manage everybody, making sure everybody is, okay. And actually the one that needs your attention in that moment and the one that needs their need met
is your husband.
Is the child. And I think it's very easy to get lost. And someone also said to me, and I can't remember, it was Eliza, at the end of the day, your relationship with your child is far more important than any relationship you're ever going to have with a teacher or a parent of a child that you might not then see again. So nurturing that relationship. And if low demand parenting or collaborating or humour or any of these things work for your child, then that's okay.
It's crazy. I would never have guessed this before having children, but communicating with little ones is also really important. And it's giving them the tools as they grow up as adults to understand the benefits of being open and understanding their emotions and why they feel angry and what have you. And
also, I don't think before we had children that we would ever think that we would contemplate some of these conversations that we're having.
I would have said, oh, no, absolutely. I'll be firm but fair,
They'll sit at the table and eat their dinner
absolutely.
And put their knife and fork together.
Right. So This was a particularly interesting episode for me because obviously I went to school with Ben Branson, played cricket with Benny. And yeah, I mean, it's no real surprise to me looking back at the way Benny was at school and, you know, what he's been through as an adult, that he is extremely successful now. But my God, he has been through a lot. So Benny said in the episode, I saw my first psychiatrist when I was 8. I've seen countless therapists. I've been sectioned twice, in and out of rehabs, hospitalised on lots of occasions. So I've seen loads of specialists whose job it is, I guess, to try and understand why is this person behaving this way. And never, ever did anyone say the words autism, ADHD, neurodivergence. Benny talks a lot about masking, about how he felt he should present as a normal person. And that's things like physical contact, eye contact. And it's interesting for me as his friend to think back of times I've hung out with him socially. And he talks in the episode about eye contact, about how, you know, he thought that was a really important thing to do, but he didn't find that comfortable. And a conversation with Benny pre this kind of discovery for him, it was quite an intense experience. He would really hold that eye contact. And so when he said that, I was like, yeah, God, he really did do that.
He spoke about it in the episode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, I can so remember that. And I think for me as well, how he talked about his experience as a child, the thing that triggered a thought in my mind is how certain maybe generations or people say, well, you know, why is there so many people with ADHD and autism now? You know, back in my day, no one was being diagnosed with ADHD and autism, you know. Well, that's kind of gives your answer there. People weren't, because I guess it wasn't recognised or it wasn't understood.
Well, people only had, and this has been, you know, uncovered in all the episodes I've done, people have a picture of what they think the neurodivergence looks like. You know, we did the most recent episode on Tourette's. People think of Tourette's as swearing, and actually we kind of busted that myth.
It's so much more than that, yeah.
So much more than that, or dyslexia. And I think when I was talking to Ben, I mean, he was full of all the stats and percentages, which were just frightening and but incredibly important. And I think he gave me confidence that actually giving your child a diagnosis, although it might not be for everybody, I could see from listening to him talk how beneficial it is for him now to be able to understand his brain. And for his daughter, who he talks about on the episode, you know, he says, it's the name for your brain. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't make you any more special than your siblings. Mm-hmm. But it can help you understand. And I think because many children were misunderstood or maybe branded as, you know, naughty.
Yeah. Difficult. Yeah.
And also boys. So, you know, even just you think of that particular behaviour, you go, it must be a boy. But actually, you know, that's not the case at all.
I feel in our scenario, I'm so grateful that we have this information now, because in our scenario 20, 30 years ago, it would have just been branded as naughty, you know, and dealt with in a certain way that would have ultimately been detrimental to the child's development and future.
And I think the main concern, and I think any parent, and I'm sure many people that listened, I think a lot of the mutual worry is mental health and the implication on mental health.
Yeah.
And I think talking to Ben and also Leanne Maskell, two adults who were diagnosed later, both followed similar trajectories of mental health problems. So I think in that sense, it's really important to bring that to light, because that gives you, as I was saying, that confidence that actually giving a name for your brain just
to help you understand it.
Yeah.
So Lisa Galley is an autism consultant, former speech and language therapist, and a mum to 3 autistic children. And this episode was on parental burnout, which I know you have experienced. So she says, we have something called the F*** it bucket, where we look at those things in our day that we can just throw in that bucket and go, I'm letting go of that. Because actually, in the grand scheme of things, in 5 years' time, that's not going to matter. I remember the day you recorded it, you came back and you were like, oh, I'm going to put that in the bucket.
It really helped. It's amazing how it's like a symbol like that, just having that tool to go, it's okay, I can just put it in the bucket. But, just things that you can really ruminate about as a parent. I think you do anyway, don't you? You get into bed and you think, oh, could have done that better. Or what you love to do is talk about how they're growing up, and you suddenly go into like this, oh, we're never going to see,
I know,
them as that age again.
No, I just rather go into their rooms and wake them up. And the thing is, I can't wait to get them to bed. Then I want to wake them up.
And I think, but Lisa, she's a mum of 3, and she had such a comforting way of talking about burnout. And I think it really helps to bring it into the forefront, because we give so much of our nervous systems to our neurodivergent kids. We are needed to help regulate them. We're often walking on eggshells. We're often exhausted. We spend a lot of time advocating for them. And I've said, if they're not in your space physically, they're in your space mentally. It is full on. And I think we just need to be aware of burnout. And she was talking about, the micro moments, the micro things that we can do in our day to just top ourselves up a bit. And I really took that away from our conversation. And she also said that when one of her children experienced burnout, it was only after that she then felt it. And I also could really relate to that. And it's a good kind of lesson and awareness just to have in your mind that even in crisis and you feel like your child needs everything, there is still a family unit and there is still you. And you're not going to make everything better all the time.
So talking about looking after yourself, that leads us nicely on to Lucinda Miller's episode. So one of Lucinda's biggest tips, if you are overstimulated, is to get into a lovely warm bath and pour 2 cups of Epsom salts in there, which you swish around. And the Epsom salts contain magnesium, and basically that magnesium is absorbed through the skin, and it helps to make the most wonderful brain chemical called GABA. And GABA puts you into this lovely calm-like state. Is that why you have a bath every night?
So that's what you need to do for me, Harry.
I mean, you have a bath every night. Even when it's roasting hot, you get in the bath.
I know. I do love a bath.
I like a bath, but I can't even get in the bath after your bath. They're so hot.
I mean, Lucinda was just a fountain of knowledge when it came to that side of understanding the benefits of nutrition and supplements for our neurodivergent kids.
You came back from that episode and ordered a hell of a lot of supplements.
But I think with the magnesium baths, actually, it's like that thing where you can do something for you and you can do something for your child, because actually magnesium baths are great for the kids as well. They are incredibly calming. Since finding out more about that, I will run a magnesium bath, even if it's in the middle of the day, because our child might be really dysregulated, and then just put on an audiobook. And it really does work. It
does, doesn't it? Yeah.
So that was a little kind of gem from an episode full of gems from Lucinda.
So this little snippet is from the episode with Leanne Maskell, who's the founder of ADHD Works, which is coaching and training. And she's an author. And it's about her personal story. So she says, communicate with them in a way that works for them. Like drop them an email or a text and just say, I just want to understand what's going on for you. I think children are really worried about upsetting their parents. And I think for parents, the really difficult thing is not giving advice and to just listen.
So Leanne was referring to herself as a teenager. And I felt that was quite a good insight into the future of there are other ways of communicating. Sitting down at a table face to face may not be the thing that's going to connect or
work for that child.
Yeah. And I just thought it was good to kind of have an insight into other ways, making sure that you are checking in. I think she was, saying that often she just didn't feel like anyone was really listening.
Mm-hmm. We do that thing as parents when we pick them up from school and you're like, how was your day? And they just don't want to talk about it. And that's one piece of advice, particularly for neurodivergent children, is that's the last thing you should do. And
that feels very unnatural.
Yeah.
Because, everyone around you is going, how was your day, darling? Did you, and basically you just say nothing, because if you say something, you don't know what response you're going to get.
Often comes out at times you don't expect.
Also, there was another bit in Leanne's episode which really, it broke my heart a bit actually, and she talks about it in her book, Blooming Differently. And she explains the story of when she was a child and how she was really, really excited for Christmas. And all the presents were under the tree, and she just wanted to open the presents, and she had to wait, and she couldn't quite grasp why she had to wait, and they were hers, so why couldn't she open them? And very, very early on Christmas morning, she got up and opened her presents, and then was told off, told that she'd ruined Christmas because she'd opened her presents too soon. And I just thought, knowing kind of the way our child's brain thinks about things, Leanne wasn't doing anything, in her mind, anything wrong. She was told she had to wait till Christmas. That's what she did. So it was a really interesting chat with Leanne, also from a girl's perspective, and the challenges of hormones, and what was autism, what was ADHD, what was the hormones, and how does that puzzle all work. So again, I think listening to these personal stories just gives you an insight, or gives you a voice of your child that perhaps they're not able to communicate at this point.
So, Kate Steer, who's the neurodivergent family coach and education consultant and founder of Nurtured Neuro Kids, she talks about an essential toolkit. So, preparation is key. So, when we're parenting proactively, what we're doing is preparing for things. We're not just preparing our children, we're also preparing ourselves. For example, we're going to a family event, and what might our child feel triggered by? What might they experience that's tricky? And what can we do in the lead up to that to feel prepared? So are those difficult conversations I need to have in advance with whoever we're meeting? Is it accommodations I need to pack in my bag? When we start to parent from that position, it helps us firstly to remove some of the things that our children find dysregulating, and therefore will trigger some of our nervous system to feel dysregulated. So I can see why you've pointed out that particular, section, because that's been something that's really been helpful for us.
Yeah.
And it's strange how long it's taken for us to realise that and also put that into practice. There's been so many occasions where we find ourselves in these difficult situations and we think, oh God, we should have known, or we should have prepared, or we should have done this differently. Or I think we're slowly, making it a habit, but it's been very helpful. Preparing the child, but also preparing ourselves, and certainly been very useful. And then in those scenarios as well, being flexible, because things aren't necessarily going to go, more often than not, they're not going to go the way you plan them to go. Yeah.
And I think that sort of beauty of being spontaneous isn't really always possible. And I think that's what we're realising. And I think when you have more than one child as well, you're sort of having to accommodate everybody's needs and wants, and I think that's where the challenge can arise. I think with preparing, Kate's toolkit was just brilliant. There were so many things in that episode which were just hugely helpful to learn and be reminded of. But I think with preparation, what we've both noticed is that by looking ahead and doing all we can to prepare for situations when we can, obviously we're human and it's not always possible, but where we can, to have a look and go, right, is this going to be a comfortable situation? Is this going to be dysregulating? How long can we stay here for? Do we need to travel separately so that one of us can leave if needed? All those sorts of things. Even recently having our week on a blackboard And actually that helps all the children, to be fair, and you. But, you know, to like have a visual timetable of what's happening, you do then start to notice the benefits and how that helps to improve all our family life.
Again, with these scenarios, it goes back to that thing of control. Like, you can't control everything, and being flexible is so important. I think you have this image in your mind of the perfect family scenario, the perfect family day out. But it's, you know, even for, you know, families without neurodivergent children, it's rarely the case. That
is one of the difficulties, I would say, that it is more usual that it's difficult than easy when we have days out. And I think as well, I look back at before we really understood what was going on and think of some of the scenarios and how cross we felt. And actually, you know, now it's starting to make more sense.
So I like this little quote from the episode with Kate Griggs, who's the founder of Made by Dyslexia and an advocate for dyslexia, because it really reminded me of one of my best friends. So she says, I think the most important thing you can do as a parent and as a child is really learn what your skills are, because they will take you a long way in life. So things like creative thinking. Dyslexic people have an amazing imagination. They love challenging the norms, so you find a lot of dyslexic people become entrepreneurs. In fact, 40% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic because they like to find different ways of doing things. And that just made me smile, because a friend of mine from a very young age, I went to school with him, he was labelled as, you know, thick and...
Stupid, we talked about in the episode.
Yeah, he was labelled as stupid and shamed for it and made to feel, you know, really stupid. And he's gone on to achieve great things and be really successful, but also is just, I just love hanging out with him because the way he sees the world and his interpretation on things is just fascinating. Like all children should be, you know, but obviously we're talking about neurodivergent children, and in this case dyslexic children. They should be absolutely celebrated. And, you know, obviously we're talking about the challenges of neurodivergent children, but there's so many incredible things about,
brilliance
about neurodivergent children, and that's something I remind ourselves. You know, we were having a conversation about the other day, and we're talking about our child and listing the good things, you know, and it's overwhelming. You know, I'm almost in awe of some of the things that, you know, these children can do because of their you know, neurodivergence. So
and often with guests that I spoke to, like Lisa Lloyd, for example, who came on, who's written the book The Betweeners, we were talking about how when your child achieves something that to someone else might seem very straightforward, but for them it's a huge achievement. It somehow means so much, you kind of want to cry. You know, and I think... when
they're just there at school doing something that all the other kids are doing, and you're just like, oh my God.
Well, they do it every day and they haven't managed to, and then they've done it. And I think that is the brilliance, that is the beauty, and that's the gift that they give you. And I think with dyslexia, again, she was talking about, you know, the inclusive classroom and how lots of the adjustments that could be made for children with dyslexia would benefit all the children in the classroom. And that's something which has come up a few times through the series, actually a lot, about the inclusive classroom and how these adaptations that could be made to help benefit our neurodivergent kids actually benefit all our children.
So your last episode was with Kate Skinner, who is the education specialist and leads events at Tourette's Action. But not only Kate, you had your brother, Magnus Johnston, my brother-in-law. And obviously Magnus came on to talk about his daughter, Alma. And this was something that you pulled out and wanted to talk about. So Magnus said, "It was a secondary trauma which triggered a lot of my childhood trauma through Rupert's accident. It was a flagpole in, right, if I'm going to help Alma, I need to do something serious to make myself as good as I can possibly be for her so I can be the person that she needs." The day that we accepted that was huge. And actually, I resonate with that. Obviously, we don't have experience with Tourette's, but just as a parent, you know, children challenge you in ways that you didn't know you could be challenged and
trigger you
massively, and that inner child comes out. And some of, you know, your person, I not obviously speak for every parent, but I know some of my behaviours around children's behaviours have been totally the wrong responses, and and really make you step back and go, right, I need to look at myself and my reactions because I need to model for my children in the way that I want them to be. You know, it's all very well me saying, don't do this, don't do that, but I know I can be guilty of that. So, you know, interesting that Magnus has really felt like he's had to look at himself to be able to help his daughter.
And again, you know, I felt it was really important. With Magnus, we spoke about his ADHD diagnosis and how a lot of his life depression kind of masked the ADHD. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it kind of made me feel when you see things in the media about all these people are being diagnosed with ADHD, I do think underneath that are real people that have, like if I think about...
Have had real struggles.
Yeah, if I think about my brother, has really struggled being misunderstood.
Yeah. And he wasn't diagnosed as a child.
No.
And, you know, like you said, people just roll their eyes and say, oh, everyone's got ADHD now. No one did back in the day, but people did. They just weren't...
Well, again, it's a misunderstanding of what ADHD is. And it's not just a hyperactive child.
No, he's the complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
And where it's really held him back in his career was self-esteem, depression, and not having the confidence to move forward in his career. But having had that diagnosis and being able to understand why he's like that, he's been able to tackle it. And then now look at him.
I know.
Since his diagnosis,
it's transformative.
Completely transformed his life and his career and his family life. And so...
And I think I wanted to bring that out because I think for a lot of people who have neurodivergent kids, it does raise the question, you know, do I see any of myself? Mm-hmm. Where's this sort of coming from? And that's why I think, you know, why we've seen such a rise in diagnosis, because actually through our children, we're learning so much more about it.
And as you've taught me, it's neurodivergent children because we're all neurodiverse.
That's correct.
Which is a point people make, you know, in a negative sense. But no, it helps you to understand it. We're all neurodiverse, and a specialist I was talking to about it helped me explain that there's a tipping point. So there's a tipping point on that scale where it starts to interfere with your life in really negative ways. And that's when intervention and therapies or medications can, you know, be required to help people. We are all neurodiverse and we all have our quirks and difficulties in life. But sometimes, you know, well, in many cases, there are people where it can have a huge impact on their life. And
when I was first thinking of a name for the series, I called it Let's Talk Neurodiverse Kids. And it was because someone pointed out to me the difference between neurodiverse and neurodivergent. Now I'm really aware of it. So if you have a diagnosis, it is you are neurodivergent. Otherwise, we are all neurodiverse.
Because there was someone actually talking about it in a negative way the other day, saying, oh, yeah, I know. Well, we're all neurodiverse, aren't we? You know, I'm sure I'm neurodiverse and you're neurodiverse and, everyone's ADHD now. And it was like, well, no, let me just stop you. Yeah, you are. We're all on this spectrum. But it's only for certain people that it gets to a point where it really interferes with their life and developing as humans and being able to go out in the world and function and achieve and be happy and be comfortable.
So there was something on Sophie David's episode. So she's an early years specialist, play advocate and founder of Little Happy Learners. We talked a lot about anxiety and play and also her own personal circumstances. And she brought to light about, and again, this was brought up in quite a few episodes with Kate Griggs, with Naomi Fisher, with Sophie, and then also again recently with Ruth, where we were talking about school readiness and about how the early years has been squashed. There's less early years play in the curriculum. And the academics are starting younger and younger, and how these specialists I've been talking to would love for the early years to be longer, and, you know, play is so important for our children to learn. And I found that really interesting and completely, I believe, to be true. But anyway, something Sophie was talking to me about in the episode, she asked me a question, so I'm going to ask you the question, which was, I want you to just think about a time you were in a classroom, sat at your desk. What lesson were you in?
What, the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah. You're at school, you're at your desk.
I generally think of double science on a Wednesday afternoon, or, you know, just staring at the clock and just thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, I was quite a disruptive child in the classroom. I spent most of the time trying to make my friends laugh and just like distracted, and I found it really hard to concentrate and learn. And so, yeah, I guess that would be my memory.
Yeah. And do you think you learnt anything in double science? Did you find that the questions, could you do it?
I could quite confidently say no. I couldn't tell you anything from science. I mean, I did science for what, like, I don't know, 8 years? I know absolutely nothing. But, you know, there are kids that are really bright and really love science and really wanted to learn and were turned on by that. And to me, it was just like, oh, my God.
So she would say that the disruption in you is adrenaline. It's cortisol. It's kind of the hormones that we don't really want when we're learning. So then she asked to flip it and now think about a lesson you're in that you loved at school. Could be anything. Doesn't need to be necessarily in the classroom, but something you did at school that you just were excited.
Sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved sport. I genuinely was excited about sport.
Yeah.
Couldn't get enough of it. Obviously, the kids at school they dreaded sport, you know.
Exactly. So, but she, you know, was talking about how that would have just released dopamine in you and how happy you would have been, and how certain teachers, just in the way they might describe something or connect, can release that dopamine. Their inspiration for the topic can feed through, and just talking about, I found it really interesting about how, of course, if we're in a state of like adrenaline or cortisol, we're not going to be in a place where we're going to be learning happily. Whereas, you know, if there's lots of dopamine and we're happy, we're going to be learning. So
yeah, quite. I mean, you know, having obviously experienced school myself, and pretty much everyone has, it's a different experience for everyone. But watching what our 3 children are getting out of it, and it's crazy how there's this kind of one size fits all. And there's such a huge variety of like personalities and behaviours amongst different children. And yeah, I mean, I would have been quite happy for I think looking back, that's one thing I say to people is like, don't stress about the learning. Just, I mean, I think I'd go back and try and get them into like a forest school or something, you know, and just...
Yeah, there's no rush.
There's no rush.
That's where, so Ruth, from my episode with Ruth Lequie, who's an educational consultant, and we were talking about school readiness, and she was saying, I've never ever met a child that doesn't want to learn. If there's a problem with children learning, then to me that problem is not the child. The problem is the environment around the child. The problem is the support or lack of support we're providing the child. The problem is what we're expecting that child to do. The problem is not that the child isn't ready to learn. And when you speak to these voices, it's really important that we listen. And I think what you were just saying, you know, having 3 children and looking back and thinking that there's sort of this rush, but actually there isn't.
Having said all that, like, a newfound respect for teachers, seeing what they do. Like, you know, and we've been in scenarios where actually we've handed the trust over to the school, and that's been helpful. You know, there's incredible people out there who teach our children and look after our children. So yeah, as frustrating as some things are with the way that the early learning is.
But that's it. It's not necessarily the teachers, it's the system and our curriculum.
Yeah.
So that's been quite an interesting conversation throughout the series. And obviously I just want to also say thank you to Teresa and Michelle, who brought awareness to ARFID, which was hugely insightful and important to talk about that. That was avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And also Donya Fahim, who I spoke a lot to about communication and how much communication becomes part of our... it's embedded in everything we do with neurodivergent kids. It's how we communicate to ourselves, how we communicate to them, those around us. Gosh, there's been there's so much to talk about and pack so much into this series, and there's so much more that we could talk about.
I'm going to read some emails now from some of your listeners. And this one's from Shelley. It says, "Hi Izzy, I just wanted to say how deeply your podcast resonates with me. Last year, my daughter was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and the past few years have been incredibly challenging. We've now secured an EHCP, and I've been learning so much about neurodivergence. It's been eye-opening, especially realising how much awareness and understanding is still lacking. I really just wanted to reach out and say thank you. Hearing your voice and guests' perspective have made me feel less alone. I've also bought Lucinda's book after listening because my daughter has ARFID. On a good note about schools, I've also created a SEND group at our school for parents going through similar situations. I try to help and volunteer where I can. Our next talk is about ADHD. It's a start, but it still needs a lot of work. I often think about how powerful it would be to build more community around this, so we don't have to walk it all in isolation. I think what you're doing is incredible and so helpful. Wishing you and your family all the very best. Big hugs, Shelley."
Thank you, Shelley. If it helps a handful of people to listen, then that's my mission. That was what I hoped, and how great to have set up that group.
Yeah, you got little splinter groups happening now, is he? Shelley's setting up her own little community, so well done, Shelley. This is from Becky. "Hi Izzy, I just wanted to reach out and say thank you for all you are doing with your new podcast. I can't tell you how much it's helping me, and I wanted to feed that back and say thank you. I have a son who's 12 and diagnosed with ASD, and he has ARFID. He stopped eating hot food when he was 20 months old, and it's always been a huge worry. I've only heard of ARFID a few months ago, and so your podcast made me emotional at several points, just to feel seen and know the way I approach things is okay and right. I actually felt a huge sense of relief when he got his ASD diagnosis, when he was about 7, as I was always worried that I'd done something wrong, and it just explains so many things. I also have a daughter who's 9 and has been waiting for an ADHD diagnosis for 2 years, but she 100% has ADHD, and also she's been on the waiting list for autism too. Although ADHD is definitely prominent for her, she really struggles with school, and the episodes with Sophie, David and Leanne Maskell really helped. Anyway, thank you again. Parenting is tough, and parenting a neurodivergent child is even tougher, and I think only those who truly understand. Take care, Becky."
Listening to Becky's email, both the emails you've read out have referred to ARFID. And I think I'm really glad we did an episode on that. And also when she's talking about the waiting lists, and I know it's really difficult, and we touched on that in Ben's interview and also with Donya about early interventions and what you can be doing whilst waiting for diagnosis.
Okay, here's an email from Emma. "Hi Izzy, I just wanted to drop you a message to say how much the podcast has resonated with me. My daughter is 11 and finally diagnosed in November 2024. We waited 4 years for her diagnosis, knowing in our heart of hearts that she was autistic, and put strategies in place to try and ease her struggles. Her struggles with routine, rules, noises, anxiety just increased the older she became. We watch Paddington on repeat, the cartoon, every bedtime. The comment you made about having neurotypical children be more aware of neurodivergent children was what I recently emailed my school about. We are currently fighting for an EHCP, initially rejected, but it's needed. She masks heavily at school, but they know that now and do know when she is dysregulated. Meltdowns at home can be extreme and she lashes out. It is so difficult. However, she's an incredible little girl, and I just wish I could help more despite trying everything to understand and help. Her honesty and empathy is second to none, alongside trying to educate her siblings. I mainly just wanted to say thank you for raising awareness on such an important subject. The emotions that we go through as parents, I feel, is only understood by those who know exactly what you experience on a daily basis." That's from Emma. That's very touching.
It's so lovely to celebrate your child. So lovely to hear her use those words. And I think for all of us, you can get so drowned and swamped by the day-to-day battles and challenges.
But nice for her to share the struggles as well, and know she's not alone and there's other people out there going through it. So this says, "Hi, I don't really know how to start this email. My daughter, 19, is currently very slowly going through the motions of getting a diagnosis of autism ADHD. My husband and I knew from a very young age that she was different to other kids and to us. We spoke to a doctor and we were told, no, she's fine. We spoke to teachers so many times and we were told, no, she's lovely and she is fine at school, a very clever girl. Then she went to senior school. This is when she struggled so much but masked everything, so sometimes I didn't know what was happening. When she went through GCSEs and A-levels, a person at school suggested she may be on the spectrum. As soon as this was said, things for her seemed to make sense. Lots of learning for us all. She is currently going through the motions to get a diagnosis. From my point of view, I knew, but no one listened or helped her or myself. From constantly learning from my daughter about everything she has or is experiencing, I really feel I understand and maybe I'm neurodivergent too. I don't feel this email is enough, but there is just so much to say." Here's an email from Francine. "Hi Izzy, I've just listened to your episode with Lisa Lloyd and it gave me so much food for thought for my own son. We're in Scotland, so the SEND system differs slightly, but the challenges and failings are sadly similar. My son was diagnosed with autism at 3 and is now 5, due to start school in August. He's currently non-verbal but understands language and follows simple instructions. We applied for a specialist provision through a long, exhausting process of meetings, assessments and reports. Sadly, we were told he didn't meet the criteria. Apparently because he doesn't have a development delay or obvious behavioural issues, and because he's toilet trained, he doesn't need the provision. But we feel these achievements are being used against him. It's stopping him from getting the education he's entitled to. Now we're gearing up for the next fight to ensure he gets adequate support in mainstream school. I worry because that support often depends on the school's budget. He's a joyful little boy who will probably settle, but without dedicated help, he won't thrive. People are often surprised he's autistic because he seems so chilled, but that means his needs are easily overlooked, and I fear he'll just fade into the background. We've got a big conversation ahead with the school, and I'm hoping for some reassurance. I want to be excited for his new chapter, but the anxiety is still very present. Thank you for all that you do. I'm looking forward to the next episode." That's from Francine.
And I think thinking of the term for our kids that kind of don't fit, these in-betweeners, which is what Lisa was talking about, is this whole, they are surviving, not thriving. And I think that's what's so hard as a parent, when you know what they're capable of, or if you feel they're not getting that support, and how hard it is to keep fighting and to keep sort of your energy up to get what you need and what needs to be provided for your child. And I think that can feel incredibly isolating. And, again, she talks so beautifully about the highs and the lows in that email, and wish them all the luck in school.
Hello, Izzy. After listening to your podcast, I honestly felt such a huge sense that I had to thank you for what you are doing. Bringing neurodiverse conversations to the forefront is so needed. Your calming voice and podcast brought tears to my eyes, as it felt like such a momentous moment to listen to people who just get it, and for it to come from someone who is in the public eye. Today I listened to your recent episodes on your amazing podcast. I felt so much emotion immediately because I didn't feel alone. Your podcast has created a space where parents of neurodivergent children can feel supported and seen. Our daughter is neurodivergent, suspected ADHD, and I've recently received my diagnosis for ADHD. We are on a tumultuous journey of self-discovery, and I related with so many things you spoke about. It felt like I'd met the people who just get it, albeit virtually and through a podcast, so thank you so much. I'm an ex-teacher who is now an educational mentor at a mental health organisation who supports young people with additional needs or who struggle with their mental health, an alternative provision for many who are unable to attend school. Neurodiversity is my passion, particularly in women, especially mothers who are ADHD or ADHD. So thank you so much, and just know that you're doing such a brilliant job.
What a lovely message. Thank you, Liv.
Well, all those emails, I'm sure, Izzy, makes you feel like what you've done has been worthwhile. So very much deserved moment of applause and gratefulness from some of your lovely listeners.
Well, I hope so. And it really has been a privilege to be able to sit in front of these amazing guests and learn and help me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to be the voice of everybody listening who feels that same isolation and need to learn and need to help others understand our neurodivergent kids better and to bring some sort of sense of community. So it means a lot to receive those emails. And thank you for coming in and helping me conclude this series.
I think I can do without a congratulations. You've done all the hard work. I'm just happy to read out some of those lovely emails and just go through the highlights from the series.
And so that brings us to the end of this episode and the end of season 1 of Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to every single person who has listened and joined us on this journey. Your messages, your stories, and your support really have meant so much to me. So to all the parents, carers, educators and families out there navigating life with their neurodivergent kids, you're not alone. And I hope that this podcast has given you comfort, confidence, and hopefully some useful tips along the way too. And finally, a big thank you, Harry, for stepping into the host seat today. Thanks so much for listening to Let's Talk Neurodivergent Kids.